Hi everyone, welcome to Exploring Sunday Scriptures for November the 2nd, 2021, actually the day after All Saints. And these are the scriptures that we will hear as part of our, excuse me for one second, our All Saints celebration this coming Sunday, November the 7th. Or is it the 6th? It might be the 6th. So typically, or in the past, when the church had these special festive moments, kind of like Christmas, it would gather together on those specific dates for those celebrations. As time went on, this became a harder and harder reality to maintain. And so a lot of what happened is these special celebrations then migrated to the closest Sunday to that actual date. Not usually preceding, but the closest Sunday following that particular date. So in our case, All Saints' Day was Monday. And so this coming Sunday, we will mark that moment for us. We will celebrate that. Now, these special days typically also have unique scriptures accompanying them. Some of these don't change annually, and some of them do change with the rhythm of the lectionary, but usually circle around common themes. It becomes the option then of each local church and each clergy person to choose whether they use those unique scriptures associated with All Saints or whether they use the scriptures associated with that particular Sunday in the cycle of the lectionary. I've chosen to use the passages connected in with All Saints. Now, part of what we do here at the church is we light candles specifically for those members of the church that have died. Then we uplift names relative to each of us who has lost a friend or loved one in this past year, as they are remembered as part of our service as well. So we can expect that the passages are going to be around themes that we might associate with death and new life, and also, you might say, the characteristics of those that we would call saints. So let's get right into the passages for this week. And the first one is from the Wisdom of Solomon. This is what they call an intertestamental book, or one of the Apocrypha, which means you can't commonly find it in all of the different translations of the Bible. So this week I'm sticking just to the New Revised Standard Version in all of the passages, as you can find this in the New Revised Standard version of the Bible with the Apocrypha. And here's what it reads in the 3rd chapter, verses 1 through 9. But the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and no torment will ever touch them. In the eyes of the foolish they seemed to have died, and their departure was thought to be a disaster, and their going from us to be their destruction. But they are at peace. For though in the sight of others they were punished, their hope is full of immortality. Having been disciplined a little, they will receive great good, because God tested them and found them worthy of himself. Like gold in the furnace he tried them, and like a sacrificial burnt offering he accepted them. In the time of their visitation they will shine forth, and will run like sparks through the stubble. They will govern nations and rule over peoples, and the Lord will reign over them forever. Those who trust in him will understand truth, and the faithful will abide with him in love, because grace and mercy are upon his holy ones, and he watches over his elect. So you can already start to hear those themes relative to All Saints' Day and remembering those of our past. The souls of the righteous are in the hand of God. They are ways of communicating reassurance and comfort. And there are many examples of this in Scripture. This happens to be one example from the Wisdom of Solomon. Wisdom of Solomon is called one of the books of wisdom. So we also include Proverbs and Psalms and Ecclesiastes within this. And so this fits within that category of sort of these pithy or wise sayings that are collected together, or stories that are collected together. I think what grabbed me most as I read through the passage, perhaps less familiar to you, less familiar to me as well, we don't read from the Wisdom of Solomon very often, is in the eyes of the foolish they seem to have died, and their departure was thought to be a disaster, and their going from us to be their destruction. But they are at peace. For in the sight of others they were punished, their hope is full of immortality. So it's sort of saying those without faith see death as an end, and see the life that was lived according to faith also to be a life of foolish choices, things that have no benefit associated with them. And what this is uplifting is there is a great benefit according to the faith that they lived. We already had that their souls will be held in the hand of God, but we also now have immortality, that they will live for forever, eternal life. So by the choices of the life lived, this is that line about discipline, having been disciplined a little, they then receive the benefit. People of faith receive the benefit based on how their faith informs their life. And so while life tested them, and here it says because God tested them, you just say how life tests us, how life tested them, their faith remained stable no matter what the conditions were. So when we remember our saints, we do tend to create that halo above their head. We have to remember they were real people. They went through real times of testing. They went through real times of challenge. And maybe there were those who thought that based on the faith that they maintained, that they were foolish. And so this is a scripture that is very reassuring in the sense that there wasn't any foolishness there, because that foolishness has led to life with God and life ever after. And again, for us, a bit of reassurance to us in the absence now of these saints of our past is grace and mercy are upon his holy ones, and he watches over his elect. It's not only watching over them, but a sense of watching over us. And it's the line before, they'll govern nations, rule over peoples, the Lord will reign over them forever. To me, this hints at that sense of their eternal presence with God informs the reality in which we live, informs us, and by informing us becomes very important to who we are. The second reading for All Saints Sunday is a very familiar passage because it is typically used in memorial occasions. Again, not a surprise to have that on All Saints Sunday because we are remembering those who died, so it is almost like a memorial service. So we hold in tension the end of life alongside of our faith that says death is not the end. Physical death is not the end of life, but merely a gateway or a new beginning into a different life. And so coming from Revelation, we have to remember that this is John's revelation. So this is John's vision. He's having this experience, and this is what he sees or visualizes through that experience. And so the words here reflect him trying to put into verbiage what he is seeing in this vision, what he's experiencing in this vision. And so this is 21st chapter. We're deep in Revelation at this point. In the vision, he writes about it as follows. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. And the one who was seated on the throne said, See, I'm making all things new. Also he said, Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true. And then he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life. So there's a couple of things that we have here. We have the vision of what is happening, and then we have the words of the voice explaining the vision. So the vision that John sees is this new heaven and new earth. Well, how do we make sense out of that? What John is trying to say is that the old has died. The old has passed away, and doesn't really give a lot of detail, but essentially says what was known before is no longer, and there is now this new reality. And so the way that the words he uses, which we try to grab a hold of, is a new heaven and a new earth. So a brand new reality. Maybe that's a good way of putting it, a brand new reality. And within this brand new reality, part of what happens is the dwelling place of God, so this holy city, as he calls it, comes down from heaven to exist here on earth. And on the throne in this holy city, so that is the one who is going to rule, the one who is going to govern, the one who is going to guide, this new earthly reality speaks these words of what this vision is. Home of God is here among people, and God is going to be right with them. So no longer will there be a separation of the heavenly realm and the earthly realm. They will be a single whole, as God will be with them. And part of the reality of this new heaven and new earth is there's no longer the pain and anguish associated with death. So we have every tear wiped from their eyes, death no more, mourning and crying and pain will be no more. That's all part of the first creation. So in this recreation, in this second creation, the pain and anguish that we know as the end of life, and also then the end of our relationships with people, at least the physical end of them, is not going to be a reality when we inhabit the space where God resides, and when God resides in the space that we inhabit. So it's kind of a both and in that respect. And we again have the sense of everything being new, reiterated at the end of this vision of John. And my computer goes to sleep, which is so odd to me because it keeps recording, but I can't see you there. But we have that newness repeated at the very end, and the sense that John is to write down this vision that he has seen, this experience, the words that he's heard because of their truth. And this truth will come to provide the water, will satiate the thirst of people for God and for a sense that everything is going to be okay. Now, Revelation is kind of tricky as a book because we tend to try to take it and apply it to our own historical circumstances. And that's a challenge to do because it was written at a specific time in a specific historical context. And a lot of the imagery that John includes was a way to hide, to mask what John was really speaking about and who John was speaking to, so that because if it had been spoken outwardly and openly, it could have resulted in a lot of death and harm. So we tend to apply Revelation as being what it will be like in the end times. And it may have some hint of how different things will be when God does inhabit our reality fully, and when our reality seeks to be inhabited by God fully. But to think of this only as a future reality, I think is not accurate. I think that there are hints in Revelation of what a person of faith gets by faith. And it's not just the reassurance of what is yet to come, but it's the reassurance of our experience now is not the conclusive experience. That even in the midst of death, we have reason to celebrate and be at joy. And that's that there is something more that is there. So I've had people say before that one of the saddest or most, that they have pitied people the most who have no faith and go through great loss themselves. And I think Revelation kind of hints at that, is if you don't have faith, then there is nothing. But with faith, with God, again, God inhabiting your space and your space being inhabited by God, your heart, your life, so faith and God's grace, then there is much to be joyful for. There is much truth in that, even in those moments, you're being satiated with God's grace. So let me shift now to our gospel reading, the third of our readings for this coming week. And this is from the Gospel of John. And John, typically as a gospel, only figures into the lectionary in sort of exclusive times, if you will. So John figures in prominently in the season of Easter. This is another occasion where John comes in. Our lectionary gospel for this year is Mark, not John. So when John comes along, it really is a departure. We can acknowledge it as a departure from our sequential reading through the gospel that really is the focus of the year. And this is the 11th chapter. So the other thing about the Gospel of John is sometimes it means that these are unique events. John has more unique events in that gospel than the three synoptics, which mostly agree on the events in Jesus' life. And the event we have here is the raising of Lazarus. So I will read it through and then explore it a little bit with you. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there's a stench because he's been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone, and Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." So I'm going to offer just a couple of different interpretations of this same passage. So there is sort of the face reading of this in the recording of the events as they are. So Mary and Martha's brother, Lazarus, who Jesus would have known because of Mary and Martha hosting Jesus and the disciples at their house in times past. So part of Jesus being emotionally moved has to do with his personal knowledge of Lazarus. This was a friend. He had known him, and so he would be distressed by his death, whatever the cause or conditions may have been that led to it. We don't know. It doesn't say. Only if he had been there, Lazarus wouldn't have died. Now, some of this seems to express on Mary's part her faith that Jesus really could have intervened and made him better. And some of that may also be the experience so far of the healings that have taken place by Jesus. We even have reference of the Jews that were with her who said, "He healed a blind man. Could he not have healed him?" So certainly he is known as a healer, but there isn't a sense that other than a healer, that more could be done at this point in time. So Jesus asks, "Where have you laid him?" Now, this may not have been in any sense leading them to think that he was going to take some sort of action in regards to Lazarus. It could have just been like any of us who go to a graveyard because our respective family members are buried there and we're going there to pay our respects. So Jesus asking where he is buried is now going to pay his respects at the loss of his friend. Now he comes to the tomb, and it is typical of a tomb of that time. We should hear hints of resurrection and Jesus's own return to life that this kind of foreshadows, not kind of, this does foreshadow. In this case, he has people roll the stone away. Now we have Martha, remember Mary and Martha and which one is which? Martha says, you sure you want to do that? It's going to smell really bad. Now there was no preservation of bodies at that time, so they did expeditiously dispose of the bodies into these tombs. They were wrapped in linen cloths, and those cloths often had a bunch of spices and other things around them, and even this pitch-like glue that helped them adhere to the body itself. But that in no way would have been able to completely mask the smell of decomposition. And so that's what she's referencing. There was enough proximity to death at that time that everybody would have known what it smelled like and what it was like. And so this shouldn't in any way sound shocking to us that Martha would have said that in the 4 days that have passed. Now, first he says specifically to her, did I not tell you that if you believed you would see the glory of God? And they take away the stone, nobody goes inside, and Jesus looks upward and speaks to God. We might say it's a prayer of praise. And he does this on their behalf so that they may believe that you sent me. So this really is about creating faith in them. And then he calls Lazarus out, and Lazarus comes out on his own. And he comes out bound, which we know that Jesus came out of the tomb unbound. So this is a difference between the two, that yes, Lazarus returns from the dead, but he comes, I picture him jumping out because he is bound, his hands and his feet in the cloth. And Jesus says, unbind him and let him go. So then we have the bindings. Now, I often think, what happened to Lazarus afterwards? I mean, if this has been your experience, everywhere you go after that, it has to be, oh my gosh, that's Lazarus. He died and now he's back from the dead. Such an interesting experience and life that awaits him due to this experience. Once again, my computer has gone to sleep while it still records. Now let me give you a little bit of an alternative interpretation of this same passage. And I'm going to work from the end of it back to the beginning. So Jesus concludes with unbind him and let him go. Sometimes there is double meaning in passages like this, or in any healing passage. And so what is it in life that really has made Lazarus, sort of dead to the world, if you will? Is there something that has bound him up? And so he's incapable really of moving forward in his own faith, in his own journey, in a sense of connection with God. How is that maybe what is being referenced here? And that had Jesus been around, he wouldn't have gotten involved with the wrong crowd? Hard to know. We could even interpret tomb in multiple ways. Did it mean an actual physical site of a tomb? Did it mean something else? And is rolling the stone away some sense of exposing Lazarus and what he has anchored his life to? I know that's a bit of a stretch to start to see these other meetings, but sometimes I think that we need to see that a passage has a general truth to speak to us, and sometimes that general truth is more than simply the facts that all come together in the passage. And so I encourage you to read through this passage more this week and think about what other meanings might be there, or what meanings you can draw from it yourself. What are the ways that we have been dead to God in the past for more than 4 days and had an experience of Jesus coming to us, and rolling the stone away and calling us forth into new life, and then unbinding our lives to set us free into a different reality. And that new and freed and changed reality, others around us recognize it, just like others around Lazarus would have recognized that. And people may have a hard time understanding the changes in our life and the changes in us as a result. So sometimes I think that looking for those other ways to understand a passage or see a meaning help us to find the general truth that's being communicated through it. So with All Saints, of course, again, having a passage with death and resurrection connects in very closely with remembering our saints and remembering our faith, and even remembering Jesus maybe calling them forth into the new life with Christ in heaven. I look forward to worshiping with you this Sunday. I hope this time has been helpful to you as a little primer on exploring these particular passages, and I pray that you might return to them a couple more times this week. I feel that that offers the best opportunity to have a very rich worship experience when you've lived with the passages a little bit, and even helps you to experience the hymns that are used and how they connect in with respective passages or the day in general and its focus. So thanks as always for joining me for exploring Sunday Scriptures, and I look forward to joining with you in worship on this Sunday as we celebrate all of our saints.